You're listening to That Thing Called Inclusion, a podcast filled with the ramblings of a Northern Irish blind man and a wheelchair-using English woman. Join our disabled duo as they share their lived experiences of disability and working within the world of recruitment. Let's end the stigma together. Let's talk about that thing called inclusion.
Okay, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello everyone, what an intro! It still gets me every flipping time. So we are That Thing Called Inclusion. I am Fuchsia and he is...
I'm Jamie.
And we are here to bring you a podcast about all things disability and recruitment, as we are in the recruitment sphere. So Jamie's going to recap on what we did last week.
And I promise I'm not going to clap like a seal. I heard myself at the start of that when you introed, I was clapping like a seal. So the last episode we released, we had guests from the National Autistic Society. We were joined by Rich Mill and we were joined by Leo. And it was a really fun, engaging, random conversation, I'm going to say. I certainly learned a lot. We're going to have to do a follow-up episode, and it was all to do with, now bear with me, this is your preference, whether it is Acceptance Month or Awareness Month, week, day, it should be a whole year, whatever you want to call it. We will be having follow-up conversations with the two of them. Fingers crossed, touch wood. And it was just a really great chat. I was going to call it a webinar. I'm like, you're not at work, Jamie. It was a podcast.
Oh my goodness, the webinars. No, it was a very informal chat, and apparently it's very well received on our podcast list, and people really, really liked it. So, I mean, for me, it was such an honour to be able to talk to not only just a fellow autistic, but someone that feels the same way that I do about things. And it kind of really validated my own thoughts and feelings about my autism and what it means to me and how I've had to live with it without knowing about it for so long. And it was a learning experience for me as well, I must admit.
I'm going to be honest, I was shitting myself when we were doing our kind of myths, because you know, everyone takes things differently, and we always say we're not professional. I think anybody working within the inclusion space, if they sit and say, "Oh, I'm professional, I know everything I should say and shouldn't say," you're wrong.
Oh, God,
because everyone has a personal preference. Some people are called disabled. Some people say, "Do not mention my disability." Everyone is different. So for me, I was kind of nervous because it's an area that we've talked about this a lot, and me and yourself, and I always want to be the best at something that I can be. I want to learn as much as possible, but that's so hard to do when you don't have that lived experience, or you haven't thought you've had that lived experience. And maybe that's the story for another time. But you know, I just loved it. I just loved the honesty, and I love getting to hear from actual organisations who have actual people with lived experience speaking for them and working for them, because we always see these organisations preaching from a little pedestal and there's nobody actually there with that lived experience.
Yeah, and they have no idea about anything. They've just read like a medical document and listened to a few things and think that they know everything. And no.
Pass, do not tackle.
Really, really does. So that's what happened. So if you haven't checked it out, that is on our podcast list, and it was an amazing experience, and we will repeat it. So today we thought we'd have a bit of an informal discussion about Jamie and I's lived experience in our own employment history. We have touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to go into I can't say that word. I'm not going to try and say that word. Good luck trying to caption that, Jamie.
It's okay, we'll get a thesaurus. You need a thesaurus and I'll just pick a random word to match.
Just put asterisk.
Many word.
Oh, there you go. There's my dyslexia, full blown for everyone to hear. So I'm going to talk about a situation that I was in, my very first professional job out of college when I was 19. And Jamie's going to talk about his experiences in certain things. So shall I go first, Jamie?
Of course, as always, I will try not to clap like a seal in the background.
So I am going to mention this company because what they did was diabolical, and I haven't worked for them for nearly 20 years. So I think it's fine. So my very first job that was a full-time job was, well, it wasn't full-time, it was actually part-time, but, permanent, proper job that wasn't seasonal work, or I'd been there for a week and left because I didn't like it, was with Next, the retail store. So I initially worked in one of their London branches when I was living near Heathrow, and it was a part-time job, and I was there in menswear. So just selling. I have worked in shops in and out since I was like 12 years old, working in, all sorts of corner shops and stuff like that, and opticians and things. So I was well used to selling. But obviously, coming into the late noughties, tills changed. They became more technical.
So many
and there was
buttons.
a lot more. And there was a lot more digital reading. There was a lot more things to read on computer screens. Like, we literally had these computer screens, and there were touch buttons down the side. And of course, I couldn't really read them at all. I blagged my way through everything, basically. But I got moved to the Eastbourne flagship store, which was being built in this massive, almost like an American style shopping centre, which is obviously very unusual for England. So it was outside the town. It had like ample parking. It had like a cinema, restaurant, which is now you see a little bit more across the UK. But back then it was almost unheard of to have these, what I think the Americans call strip malls. But it wasn't. It was in like a triangle, not a triangle, like a bit of a horseshoe. Anyway, that's not important. I don't know why I'm talking about that. So I moved down there, and I think I was like initially signed up to be a floor manager. So you're not the manager of the floor, but you kind of like semi look after a shift, basically. So there are people under you. Because I was pretty good at my job. I was really good at upselling, because Next used to love that. So, a man would come in for like a suit or a trousers or a shirt, but I would be really great at even selling in the shoes and the watch. Especially if they were going for a job interview in London. I'd be like, oh, well, this is a really nice suit, but you should probably go for this one. Awful. I hate upselling, but I was so good at it. But they brought in these brand new POS systems, so point of sale systems.
Yeah.
That were even more complicated than the original screens. And they were incredibly difficult for me to read, because the writing was really small. There'd be pictures. It would flash in and out, because obviously the system wasn't built properly. And I couldn't read anything. So I'd be scanning things. And if there was like the wrong tag on the piece of clothing, I would have absolutely no idea if it was showing up as a shirt or a T-shirt or something, because quite a lot of the times things were tagged wrong.
Yeah.
So I started to really, really struggle. And the people under me would try and hide it with me. They knew that there's something wrong. But I was already an outsider anyway, because obviously I didn't act like any of them. I didn't dress like any of them. I didn't like going clubbing, drinking. There was quite an issue with drugs within the work base. Unfortunately, it was that culture at the time. So the early noughties was what it was. So I was already really an outsider, and the management were trying to find an excuse as why they wanted me to leave. They couldn't sack me because I wasn't doing anything wrong. It's just I was slower than everyone else. There were more returns because the item was wrong. It wasn't my fault. I didn't tag it wrong. But obviously, I couldn't see what the item was on the screen, so I wasn't reading it, and things like that. And it started to get like they were trying to find fault with my working. Like I say the wrong words sometimes. And if I'm having a conversation with the customer, I might say something wrong, and the manager would be like hovering over me going, oh, you shouldn't be saying things like that. I'm like, sorry, it's not deliberate. It's just a wrong word. And it was like starting to like nitpicking about every single thing I said or did, or even the way I dressed. Like I would limp because of what's wrong with my legs. So I would be wearing bandages and stuff. And although you could wear trousers, they were quite tight-fitting business style trousers, because if you were a manager, you had to basically wear a suit. So So they were quite tailored trousers, and of course you could see a bandage under that. It's quite bulky,
Yeah.
you know, especially if it's a knee brace. And I would be told, oh, you know, that's not really acceptable. You can't really be wearing things like that. It doesn't give a right image.
I'm sorry, disability isn't the right image for you.
I know, exactly. And obviously there would be times when I'd be off quite sick because I was being paid pittance. I was being paid, I think at one point, £2.75 an hour.
Oh, wow. No.
And I was part-time. So to keep costs down, you could only have like a 20-hour contract. So technically you were full-time, but you weren't full-time, but you couldn't claim benefits because it was over the hours that you could claim, which is 16. And obviously I was paying rent. I was 19 years old. It was really, really difficult. Really, really difficult. So, you know, I had to stay because I didn't know where else I could work. You know, I didn't really have any proper qualifications.
Yeah.
Didn't know what I was doing in life. I had to support myself. You know, I was living alone in Eastbourne, which is not exactly cheap. So, you know, I stayed. And then things were getting more and more awkward. They would nitpick about the fact that I was so ill when I was so ill because I couldn't afford to eat. So I was eating one meal a day. So obviously I was losing a lot of weight. I was fainting at work, and they kept saying, oh, I just need to eat more. Well, of course I couldn't because I couldn't afford it. So I didn't know what they were expecting me to do. And they also made it like it was my fault that I was sick and disabled, and they weren't supporting me at all. But I feel like now I've had that almost 20 years worth of experience. They were trying to find a way to get me out without breaking employment law.
Try and bully you out the door.
Yeah. Although it was ropey, employment law for disability was ropey at best 20 years ago. It was still there. I could still have taken them to tribunal. So how they got me out was really flipping sneaky. So it was at the time when I think it was Sri Lanka had a massive tsunami. Mm-hmm. Absolutely horrendous tsunami. And a lot of Next clothes were made in Sri Lanka back then. I don't know if they still are. I haven't shopped in there for 20 years. And of course there was a supply issue. A severe supply issue for lots and lots of things. And one customer, you know, we were trying to find their order, and they'd ordered it months ago. I was like trying to look on the system, of course, because I couldn't really read the system properly. I couldn't really understand what was going on. So I got someone else over, and they were getting like really impatient and kind of angry. So I decided to tell them a joke. And it was just a joke about my father being an Air Force pilot. Well, he wasn't. He was in the Air Force, but he wasn't a pilot. But it was a funny joke, right? And I can't even remember it, but it was flipping hilarious. It's like crashing into not crashing into a bird, but, you know, like trying to dodge a bird, but clipping. Anyway, I think it was actually a Top Gun joke. I can't quite remember, but I changed it to be like an Air Force joke, right? It wasn't abusive, it wasn't violent, nothing like that. It was just a really, really silly dad joke. Yeah. And I was called into the office an hour later, being accused of lying about my father being a pilot. What? Well, one, what's that got to do with them if my father's a pilot or not? He was certainly in the Air Force. And two, it's a joke. I was trying to calm the customer down because Next had lost their order. Yeah. And I didn't want someone leaning over the counter and smacking me in the face. Yeah. And they put me on disciplinary for telling this joke. I didn't even swear. It was literally a very innocent dad joke. And then a week later, I fainted again at work because I was so hungry. And I ended up being in hospital for a week with malnutrition and being very, very poorly. I even got sectioned for 24 hours because they thought I had an eating disorder. But anyway, trigger warning for that. So again, when I came back to work, I was pulled into the office because I'd had too much absence. And I was like, look, I've explained the situation. You're not giving me enough hours. I'm not being paid enough because I'm under 21. So I'm not legally entitled to apparently minimum wage. I still don't know if that was the law back then, but anyway, and I was like, look, I'm really trying my hardest here. You know, it's a struggle. I'm hungry all the time. I just can't afford to eat. If you give me a few extra hours or make me permanent full time, I'll be fine because I'll be able to afford to eat. And they're like, oh, no, we can't do that. So again, they disciplined me. Right. So I have 2 disciplinary. So it's a 2 strike and you're out. It was meant to be 3, but because my discipline is so serious, they were like, oh, we're going to have to think about you leaving. And I was like, okay, I know what's coming. They are going to sack me. But what they hadn't realised was that when I was in the hospital, I was talking to one of the nurses and she went, because obviously I was in pieces explaining all of this and how mentally drained I was and how sick I was getting. And, you know, I'm now malnutritioned and that can shut down my liver. And also, and she went, oh, the railway, they're hiring people. If you're so great at customer services, go and work for the railway. And I was like, I can't work for the railway. That means actually using a computer and I can't read or write. And she went, blag it. Or just explain to them that you're dyslexic and this is the problem that you have and they can't really discriminate against you. You know, if you're customer services, you could try Gateline first. That doesn't use a computer. Do that, you know, just look after the gates. And I was like, oh, actually, I could do that. And I didn't have a computer or anything or online, nothing. I didn't even have a mobile phone at this point that could go, well, you didn't. You nearly did, just about. Have a mobile phone that could go online. Oh my God, that's how old I am. So I applied. I actually sent my CV into the railway in Eastbourne. And I applied for a job. So I went to the library, printed out my CV, all this malarkey. And I got a call a couple of days later saying, yeah, we'd really love to see you. You took the initiative to bring your CV in. That's a really great start. So I was like, bonus. So I hadn't told Next any of this. And I'd actually had an interview and was offered a job at that interview.
Fantastic.
So I just won them over. I was like, look, and I was completely honest about my dyslexia. I said, look, I've got really bad dyslexia. I'm being treated really badly in Next. I'm very, very poorly because I can't afford to feed myself. It's getting to a struggle. You guys are offering 19,000. That is going to revolutionize my life. That is going to change everything. I'm going to be able to afford rent. I'm going to be able to afford to eat. I'll be able to even run my car because at that point I couldn't even run my car. I had to walk to work. So all things like that. And yeah, they offered me the job there and then. It was for Gateline. So of course I wasn't using any computers and they said you could build up your knowledge of the railway and then when you feel comfortable enough, you could apply to work in the ticket office.
Brilliant.
And I was like, okay, but I'm happy working for a job that's doing 19,000, 19,000, like 20 years ago.
It's a lot of money.
It's like 20 years ago. And my maths is terrible. I was 19 still. Oh, 20. Mm-hmm. So nearly 20 years ago, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's higher probably than most call centres in Northern Ireland salary even nowadays.
Yeah, I know. It was an ash. Oh, well, actually, I think I was 17 to begin with, and then it went up. But I guess it's because it's the private sector, isn't it? But anyway, so and you were kind of like a security guard anyway, and it was quite a risky job doing Gateline, and you had to do really early start. So sometimes I had to be there like 5 o'clock in the morning for the very first train, and then I wouldn't leave until like 11 at night. So I guess they were paying you unsociable hour pay. Yeah. But anyway, it was a really great job. So so I got this job and I was called back into the Next office and they were like, oh, by the way, you're sacked because of disciplinaries. And I went, oh, no, you can't sack me because here's my resignation letter. And they were like, what? I went, yeah, thank you. I've got a job in the railway. So thank you for what you've done because you've been really discriminatory. You've been really awful to me. The bullying has been astronomically awful and horrendous, but you pushed me enough to go and find a better job that's paying 3 times the amount you're paying me. So, ta-ta!
Next can go next.
That was it. And my manager's face was just like, what the effing what just happened here? And I didn't even do my notice. I just walked out and went, well, technically you sat me, so I'm meant to leave now, right, aren't I? And I just did the one finger salute as I left the store. I was like, bye everyone, good luck.
Now I can clap like a seal.
Yeah, have a wonderful time. It was nice knowing you.
Do you know that sickness policy? Like, do you know where they get you that sickness policy? Oh, you have too many absences. I've had the same. Now, I'm not going to name my client or the person I work with. I was going to say client. It's not a client. It was an employer. Sorry, I'm so drawn into recruitment these days. That's all I think about. Previously, like I've had a similar instance where this client, this employer, essentially I was working in a call center with him. And it was like I had worked in call centers pretty much all my life, and everyone kind of says to me, why do you choose to do that? Because you've bad eyesight, you shouldn't be working on computers. Well, what else am I going to do? Am I going to be a manual? Like we talked about this, I can't be a bricklayer, I can't be a fireman, I can't be a doctor because you don't want me doing searching you. Like, you don't want me in the road because I'd be on the curb. And
don't want you being a truck driver.
Can't be a truck driver. Do not have me that. Do not have me behind a till. I've worked in Asda. That was terrible. I told you before, you were probably getting your groceries for free. Because I could not say those tills, same as McDonald's. But, I had my silly job after school. It was like stacking shelves, things like that. And yes, I struggled in them, but it was a part-time job. I just got on with it. It was only, do you know what I mean? For me, I was still very much studying, but when it came to it, I decided I wanted to be independent. I wanted to live in the big city. I wanted to go to university. University was an absolute flop for me because I decided to do art. Something you can express yourself and nobody tells you what to do. Art is subjective. Not university, it's not. We want you to draw these red objects. So loads of different red objects. Couldn't tell you what they were because they were just sitting in front of me on a table, all these random objects. We want you to draw what you see in the table. Well, for somebody with registered blind, visually impaired, I'm seeing a big red blob without any detail, without any tone. You want me to just put a red dot on the page? Oh, you should draw it the way that you see it because you'll see it so much different to everybody else. But I turned around to the woman at the time and said, well, I'm not going to see it different to everybody else. I'm not seeing anything that anybody else is seeing. I'm seeing a red dot. So university is a flop. So for me, I left university, living in the big smoke. I was like, I need a job. Call centers are notoriously were easier to get jobs in if you had customer service experience. So I didn't tell people I had a visual impairment or how severe my disability was. I used to just tell people, I have bad eyesight and glasses don't help. And back then you didn't really have like resource groups, like your employee resource groups, or you didn't have very much openly disabled people who talked about their employment or those kind of figures to look up to, that representation. So I didn't really encounter anybody else with a disability. And of course, because my disability is hidden, I would just stumble around and came into trainings, could not see the board. I would always have a friend in the group who would help me do it. So what I did is I overcompensated with my personality. I used to be so in your face, so jokey, your best friend, and you would be helping me with my notes and you wouldn't be realising how much I was using that support. It was terrible. It was terrible because those were the days you actually had a notepad in training. You come in, you got your fancy wee notepad and your wee barrel pen. Do you know what I mean? And you had to take the notes off the board. So I went job to job. I honestly did call centres in Belfast. If anyone's listening who worked in one, we were probably workmates at one point. This one particular employer that really stands out to me was I had told them I was visually impaired, registered blind, and for me that was such a big deal. I had went from, I don't have a disability, or I need glasses, or I need glasses, but I refuse to wear them. I had this whole journey with my disability, but at this point I told them, and I was like, yes, I did this. I told my mum and all. I was so proud of myself. But I, unfortunately, was waiting for my adjustments, and they don't come as quickly as we need them. So people just be sitting there in limbo, waiting for this piece of either assistive technology. For me, it was a comfortable seat, an arm, I could pull my computer back and forth. It was also the likes of Zoom text if I needed that. At that stage, I'd never really encountered it, so I didn't know if I actually needed it. I was just so used to zooming in on the computer, or, those on the podcast don't see this, but on the camera, this is me on a computer. You get a halftime show of my wrinkles, so you do.
You can see his pupils.
Yeah, it's like I'm almost nose to the computer, and that's where I be with my phone. So people can visibly see that I have a disability when I'm working. So this place was not doing anything to support me in that time. They would just tell me to get on with it. But I was getting sore. I was in agony. My back was killing me. I now have sciatica because of the strain that I put my body in and have dropped nerves that much in my life. So my back is lovely. I'm constantly having to stretch it out or have my partner come and drive his fist into the back of it, which sounds really aggressive, but it hits the pain point. So it does. It helps. So I was on a lot of meds. I was struggling, and of course I was off work. And I was getting disciplinary after disciplinary. I was getting referred for a health assessment after health assessment. And like, I don't mean this in no disrespect. You cannot keep sending disabled people for health assessments because it's not going to do anything. We're not going to get healthier from them, or disability is not going to disappear. We need to speak to somebody who's a person who understands, who has empathy, who can understand what you're saying without trying to react to what you're saying. Yeah. So at BT, that was one thing I know. Oh, I just said the name of the company. Well, now you know who it is. I mean, you could have seen it if you were on my LinkedIn. But at that time, it wasn't them directly. I will say that it was a kind of version of it in Belfast who did the recruitment for them. Now, within this Flex Centre, I essentially had managers who were talking to me rather than listening to me. So I would say something, and rather than listening to respond, they were listening to react, so jumping at me. And I was told at one point, oh, smoking makes your disability and your back worse. So it does. That's what your back's so bad. It's not because you're straight into the computer. And I can remember being told to just get on with it. Just get on with it. I don't know what you want us to do at this point. We've already got you a large monitor. This was after 6 months. And at that point there, the systems had changed. So I had just got my adjustments, had so much time off with leave with my back. And then I got my adjustments and the systems changed. So I needed my adjustments refigured again. And had to go through access to work assessment, which I think we touched on previously. And I got my access to work assessment, and the lady said to me there, she's like, you are so down, you're so run down. She goes, I can see it in your eyes, you're deflated. And it was a wee bit like that nurse she spoke to, because she just kind of gave me this little, you're better than this, why are you letting them kind of get you? And it's so true. I was a shell, I became a shell of myself. I'm bubbly, outgoing, but I was depressed, I was so mopey. And then I actually got the flu, just one thing after another. I got the flu, and it was the worst flu I've ever had in my life. I seen Ronald McDonald at the bottom of my bed, just sitting there at the bottom of my bed. And it was when I had a temperature. It was the worst flu I've ever had in my life. I've never encountered anything like that. So I ended up taking time off. Now, bear in mind, I hadn't had a sick period in maybe 4 months at the stage, 5 months. Yeah. But when I came back, it was November. I was told everything was fine, not to worry about it. It was so much time since I'd last absence. And then I came back after Christmas, so 2 months later, and I was sacked. On the first week of January, I was brought into an office and sacked and escorted out of the building like a criminal because of my absence. But bear in mind, I'd been crying out for help this whole time, wasn't getting it, was sent to physio. They did get me some physio, which was lovely. But after the first 4 sessions, the woman said, you need to come back to me regularly. I couldn't afford that. I was already paying taxis to get to work every day. Like, I can't just walk in, especially today. It's so sunny outside here. I can't just walk to work. I'd be probably walking in front of the car, which I have done numerous times. So I was walked out, wasn't allowed to say goodbye to my friends, wasn't allowed to speak to anybody or even get my own belongings. One of my colleagues was sent to get them and bring them to me, so like a criminal. And I was escorted out of the building. My manager tried to talk to me on the way down, and I honestly just sat and cried. So I did. And then I think I said something nasty getting out, and I probably regret it to this day, but my eyes, you were my manager and you did F all to support me during that time. So it really did shatter my trust.
Escorted out of the building.
Escorted, yeah. And had a hand in my pass. And this is the thing that annoys me. It was 2 months after I had actually come back from having the flu. I was off for 2 days. And even then when I came back, I was told you shouldn't be here. You look absolutely horrendous. So it annoys me because companies should have policies around this. You know, you have sickness policies, but you should have disabled sickness policies, because some disabled people have weakened immune systems, there we go. And then people who maybe are waiting for adjustments, they're in pain, or they maybe are run down, or maybe if an adjustment stops working, that can really affect with your mental health too. You've suddenly lost this crutch that you've relied on. So I think companies need to adjust those policies, but for me, it was just absolutely mess. So it was, and I then struggled. I went into other jobs, and I didn't get my happy ending. Like, I didn't go into a job and start disclosing again about my disability. In fact, that made me take steps into myself again, where I didn't want to disclose my disability. And then I got a job in a contact centre and working for the bank, in one of the Northern Irish banks, and essentially in that role, the kind of same thing happened, only I was making mistakes in the system. I wasn't copying numbers down properly, silly things like that. It was like a matrix system. You know the matrix, the screen with the green little writing or the white writing. I don't know what colour it is.
What the old DOS systems?
Yeah, it was like
Nora.
what is it? Backdoor system, back something it was called.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was horrible, and I struggled really
I used that with Thomas Cook.
But they disciplined.
Couldn't read it.
But I bet you get told off for not using the term. I got disciplined for it and was told they were moving me departments because of it.
And yet, it's not our fault that we can't read a system because it's not built for people like us. I mean, Jesus.
Yeah. And like I walked out of that job. I've walked out in my lifetime, I think, out of 3 jobs, and it's because yes, it's on me to self-disclose. But once I've started opening up to you as a manager, and you're noticing me struggling and things, like you should be coming to me as well and making it feel safe to have those conversations. I wasn't getting that. One job, I got off and threw my headset out of the call centre and stormed off the floor and shouted a very terrible word to my manager, walked out the front door. Another job, one of the bank, I actually got up and I just walked out when he told me that they were going to discipline me again. And I just got up and walked out crying. Walked home and told everybody I'd walked out of a job, and that's 2 of them. And then the third one, I can't even remember what happened to that one, but I know what I think it was something to do with what Teresa said about my. It was I'm not going to say what it was, but it was a very public company, and I was working for an agency. And unfortunately, a lot of big companies do it right, but when you come through an agency, you don't get to experience that, and that was my problem. A lot of contact center jobs with 3 agencies, so I struggled. I remember people spreading rumors about me because he's dramatic because he needs support, and if you don't get him support, he'll take out the bus.
Utter the same.
She's
just a drama queen. There's nothing wrong with her.
Yeah, like it's ridiculous. And some of the things, why aren't you wearing glasses? If your eyesight's that bad, you should be wearing glasses. Well, how can you be registered blind if you can see? Where's your guide dog? That's terrible. But when you hear it so much, it grates in you.
You hear it all the time. It's not fun. You hear it all the time.
Yeah. You don't look disabled. Well, thank you for that. I don't actually know what disability looks like, but can you draw me a picture maybe? Like, I have a hidden disability. It's so frustrating. And I'll be honest here, I have taken employers to tribunals over discrimination, and I've not won the case in the sense that I've won and went to court and had my moment. I've settled. And part of the reason I have settled with employers or companies I have taken to the Equality Commission in Northern Ireland is because part of those agreements with the Equality Commission in Northern Ireland is they will train your staff. You have to undergo that training. Yes, I'll get a lovely little payout and a lovely little holiday at some point for the trauma cause, which is great. I was able to buy my laptop because of a case that I had. But I think for me, I had to grow a wall. I had to put my wall up, so I did, and learn to kind of stand on my own 2 feet, because for about 5 or 6 years, I let people talk down to me. I let people tell me my disability was a weakness. I wasn't disabled enough. And the past 3 years, that's changed. I now try to big other people up. If I have friends in other jobs and I see what they're doing, and sometimes it annoys me because I see friends still in those jobs in customer service or call centres struggling just to get by. And then I'm like, just come work with me here. You've got the skills, come to recruitment. Imagine flipping that table and you being on the side of the table where you're making that change. You're implementing that support that person needs from the get-go. It's such a wee 360 moment for me. I find all emotional there.
It is. And, I was thinking even in the railway, it wasn't perfect. And again, I left that job for something better because the way I was being treated, like when I went into the ticket office, finally, when I felt like I could, I had a manager that would spell check my private notes.
Do you know, I have in my job at the moment in AMS, I call him my ghostwriter. And it's not even somebody I work with anymore. It was one of my best friends works at AMS, David. And every little post I do on my LinkedIn or my Twitter or even my blog that I had stopped when we started this podcast, which is really bad. But he reads everything for me. I send it to him and he reads it for me. Even the PowerPoint presentations, I'd be, can you look at this? Because I need to spell check everything. And even when
fine. You're asking for that service. I mean, I was literally leaving pieces of paper there because it was things like trying to spell out station names. Because I used to be an expert at planning long distance train journeys using multiple different train services. So say someone wanted to go to John O'Groats to Land's End. I could plan that. I was really good.
I can imagine you thriving in this little office doing this.
I know, but I can't tell the flipping time, so I have no idea how I was good at it. But I just love the patterning of it anyway. But I would like have a pen and paper when I could write. And I would be writing down like little notes and stuff. And I'd leave it next to my computer and I'd go off to the loo or I'd go off to a break. And I'd come back and the words would be underlined in red with the spelling. I was just like, I am going to swear, bitch, what the do you think you were doing? I was like,
I do
it doesn't
too.
matter if you spell it correctly, I'm still not going to be able to flipping read it.
Like, I do too. Like, see, when I'm taking notes, I'm like taking my notes. Do you know when like you're on a camera meeting, you're in a meeting, a webcam meeting, and you're trying to take notes, and you have to obviously have your book away from you because you can't be sitting with your book in front of you. And I'm sitting making notes, and then after the meeting, I look down and I'm like, oh my god, what have I tried to spell here? Because I can't even see that I've written because my hand's been too far away. But that's the same with everything. Like, see, my hand-eye coordination. I roll cigarettes. And I always joke with people and say, most of it's going to end up on the floor. And my partner will attest that. He fights me all the time and asks me to have a designated spot to roll. And I say, I'm not a cat. It's not my litter box. It's just a mess I make because my eyesight. So, I leave a mess.
We don't endorse smoking, by the way.
we do not smoke. I only smoke because that manager I told you about earlier who told me I should stop. It's pure respect for her. That's just, by the way, it's not. It's stress addicted. But we will stop it one day. But I think, for me, like, honestly, I think that you see when you go through those jobs where you've had that kind of negative feeling, like, see now I can laugh about that so much and like we're joking about it, but see at that time it's the worst feeling in the world.
Devastating.
It's devastating. Like, I was on antidepressants.
I thought I was losing. I officially thought I was going mad and that everyone hated me. Obviously, now I know I act a certain way because of my autism, which means that I do rub people up their wrong way. And, if you're a friend of mine, you're a friend of mine and you accept all of my weird behaviour and quirks. But there are a lot of people who do not like me because of the way I act. But now I know it's not a me problem.
Yeah, that's it.
It's a them problem.
It's 100%. I'm like Marmite, I say. You're like me. We're like Marmite. You either love us or you hate us. And I think for...
Chocolate Marmite, I would say.
I really don't like Marmite. But I love you. But, it was a terrible analogy there, wasn't it?
You don't like me.
But I think that, see, with those wee jobs, if anyone listening, by the way, those moments you will feel like, why me? Why does this keep happening to me? And I'm gonna be honest, speak to somebody, reach out. I reached out to the RNIB, I reached out to the Equality Commission. If you think you're being discriminated against, go speak to the Equality Commission in the UK. They will look at your case. Sometimes they will fund your cases for you. Obviously, I've been lucky and I've been able to get 3 of my cases funded through them. And it didn't end up in court. It was very much settled. But I think for me, you have to become an advocate for yourself. There's a time that you have to kind of say, enough is enough. I'm not doing this no more. And for me, I now disclose my disability, but that's because I don't want to go back. And I think once you reach that moment in your life where you kind of feel that you can say, I'm disabled, this is what I need. If you can't give me it, toodaloo. All right, next. We shout out to it earlier. So I think you have to really be your biggest advocate in that space.
You do. And I mean, this is how I got this job. I was discriminated against applying for a job, and the business turned round after I'd complained publicly and privately, turned around and offered me a job. Now, obviously, that is an ideal world for every disabled person. They have a bad experience, they get offered a job. But it can happen. You took someone to the tribunal. I just spouted off on Twitter.
Twitter's a great platform for it, though.
Whatever works for you. And it did work. I mean, I'm obviously very lucky that it works, but I am all for... People say you need to stop complaining, Fuchsia. You need to stop being so loud and shouting about all the terrible things about disability and stuff like that. I say all these things because people don't believe me. They seem to think that it's a one-off event, and it's not. All my life, my disability has been weaponized against me, and I will say weaponized because it's made me so mentally and physically unwell because accommodations weren't in place, or I was just not left alone. I was bullied and harassed because I was different from other people.
You made her feel less.
All I wanted to do was get a wage, go back to my really horrible damp flat, Have my pizza and be in peace. That's all I wanted when I was 19. I'd had a particularly awful, horrible upbringing, and I just wanted to be independent at 19, build a life for myself, and yet every time I tried to do that, someone was there to smack me down and go, "You're not worthy of this."
Yeah.
But now look where I am. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, yes, I have painted my walls and my door. And for those who can't see it and you are watching it on YouTube, the wall behind me is kind of like a really deep velvet red, and there's posters on the wall from Gladiator. And the wall to the left or the right, depending how this is flipped, is black.
Her room's not on
And
fire.
the floor is black.
Her room's not on fire, by the way. I made the mistake of thinking there was an orange glow behind you one day, thinking you were on fire,
you thought
and like jumped at the computer. So it's not a fire. Fuchsia is smoking hot, but it is not fire behind her. It's the red wall. And like back then, we've seen the culture change. We've seen the shift in society. We've seen people more represented. Everyone talks about DNA. Oh, let's talk about this. We're doing this. We're doing that. But it's nice to see. There's still a long way to go, but we're getting progress. And I think because we did have those employment where things weren't as secure for us or were more discriminatory, let's just call it what it is. You know, I think that I like seeing the change, and I love being part of that change coming. I think that's just, it's real. Again, I keep saying 360 moment. It's like a boomerang. You've been through it, you've went around it, and now you're actually helping make the change. So it's this boomerang moment. But I'm just conscious of the time because we always run out of time on a podcast.
We're prattling on, aren't we? And these poor people probably only had half an hour to do the washing up, and now we're going on to 43 minutes. And
bring us for your doggy walk later.
Like, oh no.
But should we do our uninclusive rant of the week?
Oh yeah, oh no, I can think of one because it happened to me this morning.
Go.
And I tweeted about it. So, I was on the phone to a service provider who I'm not going to mention because I do actually need their help. And I explained I'm a wheelchair user, and they said, well, then how can you talk? And I thought I misheard them because I do have tinnitus. So I do actually have a hearing problem. And I thought they said walk, but I misheard it as talk. No. They wanted to know how I could be a wheelchair user and talk. And if no one can see my face, if you're listening to this on a podcast, my face is literally a WTF face. As in...
What the fudge?
How did you jump for a wheelchair? Is the only wheelchair you've seen is someone in a catatonic state? Is that the only person you've seen in a wheelchair? I mean, I'm sorry if that is your experience, but what the...
I just don't understand why that's the question that comes, is how can you talk? How can you... I'm in a wheelchair. How can you talk? What do you mean?
How can I talk? I don't shut up. If anyone knows me, I literally do not shut up. My autism is just this information highway spilling out of my mouth like a river of poop.
Do you know, it's like, I just, honestly, if you're a wheelchair user out there and you can talk, you're magical. You're you're a unicorn.
I know, I'm the only wheelchair user in the world that can talk. Wow. Oh my God. But I did tweet it this morning because I was just like... No, it wasn't this morning. It was yesterday.
It was yesterday. I remember seeing it. I do remember seeing it because I was like, oh my goodness, what have I missed? Because I'm not going to lie, I have Fuchsia on my notifications, so I know when she's tweeting. I'm not a stalker, I'm a friend.
Was it yesterday? I don't know.
It was either yesterday this morning. Mornings blur in during the week, and I know like we've had Monday off with the Easter break over here.
I think that's it. That's it. It's just because of the holidays, the public holidays. For those of you listening in the US, England had a 4-day public holiday, of 2 bank holidays attached on either side of a weekend, and it's madness when that happens.
We devour lots of chocolate.
What we're doing.
Eat lots of chocolate Easter eggs. My rant of the week. Now, I'm hoping this isn't something I haven't ranted about before, but I got a letter the other day to post, which was from... I don't know how it comes from. It's like kind of like the trust. It's one of the trusts in Northern Ireland where I would have been registered when I was younger. My disability would have been registered. So I received a letter in the post the other day. And on this letter, it actually says that back then, Jamie is classified as handicapped. It's stamped, has me labelled as handicapped. It's from the 90s.
Oh my God.
And called me handicapped. And I'm sorry if anyone finds that word offensive. It's a terrible, outdated,
It's a
disgusting
horrible
word.
word.
And I seen it and I read it. And I gotta be honest, I actually got this before the National Autistic Society episode, and I was going to rant about it then, but I just couldn't bring myself to say it because it was about me. It was me reading about myself and my disability, and I was being called handicapped by medical professionals at that time. And I know we've came a long way, but it kind of just reinforced this sense of confusion and anger I had about my disability. And if that's what I was being called at that age, and that was what doctors would tell me I was, any wonder I had an unhealthy relationship with my disability.
Darling, you can't even play golf. You can't even see the ball. So how can you be handicapped?
Touché.
Thank you.
But yes, that's my rant of the week. So we've come a long way, but the past still sucks. It still hurts sometimes.
Yes.
That is mine.
That's your rant. But we should leave on a positive note because my cat's in the background. And she's really, really hungry. And we're really, really hungry. And if you're listening to this, go and get food. Go and eat if you can.
From me, goodbye.
And from me, goodbye. We are That Thing Called Inclusion. And thank you for listening.
Till next time. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to That Thing Called Inclusion. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Check out our website, www.thatthingcalledInclusion.com, for transcripts of each episode, or on YouTube for video and closed captions. Or check out our socials at That Inclusion. If you'd like to join us on the show as a guest speaker or advocate organization, then please drop us an email at info@thatthingcalledInclusion.com. Until next time, stay inclusive.